Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to this session, How to Ensure Women's Socio-Economic Rights in Europe. This session is part of the European Liberal Forum's hub at this year's Freedom Games. My name is Lauren Mason. I'm Project Officer at the European Liberal Forum in Brussels. We are a think tank with 47 members, one of which is Fondation Liberté, who are organising this year's Freedom Games. This afternoon, I'm very pleased to be joined by Justyna Kopińska, an award-winning reporter, Andrzej Domański, who is Deputy Director at the Civic Institute, and Agnieszka Chłoń-Domińczak, who is Associate Professor at the Institute of Statistics and Demography at the Warsaw School of Economics. This webinar is being interpreted in English and Polish, so you can choose your language. So to turn to the topic at hand, I do want to start on a rather positive note by recognising that women's rights in the social and the economic sphere have made huge progress in the last decades. We see that women can work and can have a career, they can have their own bank accounts, they can choose largely who to marry, and they have passed over some of the household chores to men and to machines. So we have come quite a long way since the 1950s, but there is still a lot of progress that can be made. That includes both in the physical and human rights aspects, such as combating sexual violence, ensuring reproductive rights, but also it concerns social rights, such as getting women into leadership positions and ensuring equal pay. So there is progress to be made, but there is also a danger of backsliding and going back on the progress that we have already achieved. And precisely today, in the Polish context, which I suppose is what unites many of us here, we are seeing a restriction and a tightening of some women's rights, unfortunately, especially recently in the area of abortion laws. So to turn over to our great panelists today, I would like to invite Andrzej actually to give us an overview, since this question is probably at the forefront of all of our minds, an overview of the situation currently with access to abortion for women in Poland. Why do you think this is happening now? What's been the trigger for this?
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I need to say that each crisis, and that is a crisis, what we are having now, it also creates opportunities like the COVID pandemic crisis has created numerous relations to change, or opportunities to change social economic relations. The crisis related to abortion legislation in Poland evoked by a pseudo judgment of the pseudo tribunal and inspired by the current political game, it will contribute to something that I believe was falsely named a compromise, and will result in this false compromise being abandoned, and the Polish abortion law, which in its current version within the so-called compromise, has been still most restrictive in Europe next to Malta, I believe. It should be liberalized. Which way should it go? How fast? What the procedure would be? I believe we'll see that in the months to come. But the dynamics is quick, and the pendulum has been moved by the extreme conservative circles in Poland, and I believe we will have the swing back for the benefit for all of us, as I believe.
Thank you, Andrzej. Yes, maybe you can tell us also what you think we can learn from this situation that's been happening in Poland for other states who are maybe facing similar problems. Is there a message that we can take from, for example, the mass protests that have been going on?
Oj, naprawdę ciężko mi...
It's very difficult for me to say what other European countries could learn from Poland in respect of the defense of the procreation rights of women. we are lagging far, far behind such common sense center. But what is great is that Polish women and Polish men have hit to the street, and despite this difficult pandemic situation, they say no, they do not agree for our country to be controlled by the alliance of the church, Catholic Church, and extreme right-wing parties. And I believe this is excellent news also for the whole of Europe. Perhaps these events will initiate Poland's retreat from right-wing populism signed by Ordo Iuris, which we have been struggling with for 5 years at least.
Thank you. Okay, Andrea, we'll come back to your economic angle a bit later on, but I'd like to turn to Justyna, since we are talking now about sort of the human rights and the physical aspect, because I know that you've been reporting on topics relating to women's safety and access to justice. Could you share with us some of your observations and maybe the main challenges that women are facing in this area?
We are very sorry, the microphone is dead. In a moment, we hope to resume the voice transmission. So let me sum up what I've just said. In my opinion, Poland is not a just country, and injustice mainly applies to women and children. When I was researching harassment and rape in Poland, the thing that I noticed instantly was that almost half of the cases were issued with the suspended jail sentence, and often the perpetrators smiled at the victim they met in small towns in the street. The judges I talked to seemed to be very patriarchal in this culture. So there are judges who say there should be no punishment for harassment. I researched Polish female soldiers at the mission in Afghanistan, and I could see how all that changes the ladies. It was not about purely sexual acts. It was that it was your superior, and you act in a role full of honor, patriotic. You represent your country, your state. And that evokes serious changes in your soul, in your spirit for all your life. And the fact how the judges reacted with neglect, with laughing, it changed my attitude to people on those positions in Poland. Perhaps I should say, if in Poland the exposed position, respected positions are occupied mostly by men, translates into the fact that problems of women are not understood. For instance, witnesses in courts. I remember a renowned court expert who has been appointed to numerous violence, rape cases. She told me that the best witness is a male with a good social position, about 40 years of age, with good job, friends. That is a person the court would trust. A woman is by definition less reliable, while the child is fully unreliable witness. By definition, nobody believes child witnesses. I was scared as a reporter. It's bad role to take. Once you collect all the material, you need to act both as the perpetrator and as a victim. You need to feel both sides. I remember myself feeling the victim. I felt helplessness, absolute helplessness. And the fact that women in Poland are asked what dress you were wearing. Were you wearing makeup? And she needs to remember the rapist penis. Just the questions shift us to the world ruled by the men. And when I think about women's rights in Poland, I believe women are deprived of their voice. I mainly speak of small towns when women cannot afford lawyers. It's not the voice, it's merely a whisper.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing those scenes. That's quite distressing in some cases. I think it's interesting that you talked about both patriotism and patriarchy in a similar context. To what extent do you think that these rules are a result of a cultural mindset, and to what extent are they inherently related to the legal system? And perhaps how do those interact when we're thinking now about how to solve these problems?
Nie wiem, czy już mnie słychać dobrze? Tak. Ja myślę, że...
I think that in the very beginning, when I was doing my research, I was convinced it was the legal system. And what the tasks I set for myself as a reporter, as a woman, was to change the system, to change various legal aspects. And I do remember when in one of my works about a nun who applied cruel violence to children, the law was changed to protect children in such centers. And I felt, well, I felt that the word has power. I believed that what I was doing made sense. But in the course of time, when I was watching what is happening in Poland now, when I watch Ordo Iuris, the activities that close women's mouths, the fact that this can even happen in my country, I see that it has huge cultural background. The change of law is essential, but it will not be enough. We need to change the mindset of girls at school, boys at school as well, because how they are taught, what they are taught, I think the changes in the context of justice applied two aspects mainly. The first thing in Poland that makes be excluded from justice, that somebody may be treated worse, humiliated even, is poverty, is that some people simply cannot afford a lawyer, they have no friends who would opt for them, they do not know good journalists, then you are in a different context. I say that journalism is giving the voice to those who cannot speak on a daily basis. And the point is that such people should regain some trust in justice. And the other aspect is the sex and the gender. As I used to believe that the law should be changed and that would be followed by good things for women. Now I believe it has to be on the two levels. And by the way, thank you very much for what you said in the question. The level of culture in our country, the level of education is equally important. And now the Minister of Science and Education is a person whose utterances of equality rights are outrageous. So I think that although I know how much the Law and Justice Party did for poor people in our country, I believe they take us back in culture, in civilizational terms.
Okay, yeah. Agnieszka, I would like to turn to you now. So you've been researching about the gender pay gap, which is of course one of the biggest blocks for economic freedom for women. I know that the EU estimated that women earn on average 16% less than men. And we saw last week, well, it was the 4th of November is the day that is described as being the point in the year after which women effectively work for free if you balance out the difference. So what do you think are the main origins of this gender pay gap, and how do you think we can solve it?
Jest szereg elementów, które się składają na...
There are numerous elements that contribute to this gap in salaries. Some of them are a result of elections. Women often work in less paying industries like education or healthcare, and that creates that gap. The other part of that gap is that women often work part-time in Poland more often than the other countries in Europe. Also, maternity is the element that enhances the gender difference between men and women. And so in Poland, we see that gap. Moreover, our research shows that it starts instantly on the moment of graduation. On graduation, female graduates, even who complete university education and start work, earn less than their peers from the same university. Even in cases of well-paid jobs like technical IT studies, the gap in salaries is relatively higher, even though the ladies earn better than in other industries. So again, there are a number of things that bring about that gap. Perhaps the education, as Justyna mentioned, could result in the fact that ladies are less straightforward. They cannot express their pay demands so clearly. It's more difficult for them to address the employer. And the second thing is, when they plan their matrimony, they can select jobs that are more stable but less profitable in terms of salaries. Anderson said that in Europe, in developed countries, we have unfinished gender revolution. So, Lorraine, as you said, on one hand, we have a situation where women have gained their rights. Theoretically, they are equal in access to the labor market, election rights. But somewhere there, if we have a look at what is happening at home, if we look at the share of work at home, care over children, still women dominate. And that also restricts their capabilities of professional activity. So there are many factors that contribute to that gap. And it not only requires legal regulations, as Justyna said, but building awareness that we need to fight for equality, not on the labor market, not only in the legal system, but also in sharing household duties, in what is happening at home, how partners work, especially in case of childcare.
Yeah. How do you think that we can put enough emphasis on the life-changing nature of motherhood or parenthood without putting it too close to the center of the discourse that we somehow reduce women's problems only to the fact that they chose to have children?
To oczywiście jest szereg rzeczy, na które
There is a number
należy...
of things that we need to pay attention to. First and foremost, the access to childcare. Some 7% of children age 0 to 3 have access to this kind of institutions. We can see a great gap when speaking about the number of children in the cities and in rural areas to take part in this kind of education for the youngest, the childcare for the youngest. This automatically limits the ladies' access to labor market. This is the choice, a stark choice. If I want to work, there's nobody to take care of my children. This is a great barrier that we have to face all the time. And on top of that, ladies, you make use of maternity leave. In Poland, we have 2 weeks off for fathers. Still, it has not been regulated. It's not equal treatment of ladies and men with this respect. We know that in Scandinavian countries, for example, there is a greater freedom of choice, more time for men to take care of children. This makes it easy to have this equal treatment. So child access and the number of days off, these are assigned to just one parent, the mother. If parents want to share this time, it's difficult to share this time between 2 parents.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Andrea, I'd like to come back to you to hear also your position on the gender pay gap, but also to ask you a bit about encouraging women into leadership positions. What do you think, for example, about quota systems? Do you think that they are a good solution for trying to get more women on boards of directors or in public posts?
Dziękuję. Oczywiście
Thank you for this question. This pay gap in the economy has always existed. You cannot turn a blind eye on it. Ladies earn less in all economy sectors. There's a kind of overrepresentation of women in the services sector that generates less than production sector, but still women, if they occupy the same positions, earn less or much less in many cases compared to men. There is a glass ceiling in listed companies. For example, Polish 20 biggest companies had no lady president. It was only last Thursday when a woman was appointed to become one of the presidents of a company. It was Lotus. Only 6% of listed companies have presidents, women presidents. The number of ladies on boards, less than 16%. So you can clearly see that there is a glass ceiling. The glass ceiling exists. And it stays there. Not only do we need to speak about business, but also about academia. The number of graduates of higher education institutions, mainly women, PhD courses, 50-50, and the number of professors in Poland, a bit more than 10% in our country. So there is a clear problem. And this is a very serious problem. So what are we supposed to do to overcome this problem step by step? First and foremost, transparency. Only 2 companies publish reports, pay reports, distributed between men and women. Such reports may play a vital role because you can clearly see the magnitude of the problem. Second of all, what Madam Professor was speaking about, maternity leave or parents' leaves. Men in Poland are willing to use this kind of leave, but only 1% or less are ready to use it. So this is the heart of the problem, kind of. Speaking about pay inequalities and women's rights in general, we focus on upbringing of women, but we should also focus on upbringing of men because they are the other side of the coin. There is a reason that young men are not that willing to stay home longer and take care of their own children, to devote time to these children. This is a key moment of their life. I had to make this difficult decision. I was working in this kind of business sector where you work for 11 or even 12 hours a day. And I knew I was going to be a dad, but I decided to switch jobs. But I was 38, so I was not young. Most of men are not ready to use this kind of leave. In my opinion, it should be obligatory for dads too. If unused, you lose it. And the third element, kindergartens and nurseries. Until 2015, many of them were created. It was not an astounding pace, but we had some of them created. Still not enough to provide this possibility to enjoy flexi working, to return to work, which results in pay disproportions, which is also very important for the pension system. Madam Professor has got great experience regarding this. Look at women's participation in the labor market, the lowest, or one of the lowest in the whole European Union. And the problem of ladies' very low pensions, well, it will aggravate. You will see it in the years to come. What can we do to create leaders? We should give good examples. Am I the proponent of the quotas and parities? No. Most of the problem is in the head of the ladies and men. But I'm afraid that this quota system, parity system, creates new division lines that are not wanted. It might antagonize men and women. This is the problem that we need to tackle, but let us not create new division lines.
Yeah, thank you, Andrzej. I saw that Agnieszka would like to comment on that from her perspective.
Tak, znaczy ja powiem, że gdy żłobki cały czas są tworzone.
Yes, kindergartens and nurseries are being created. The Maluch program that was launched in the previous terms of office of the Poland's government is being continued. We need to indicate the new places being created, but we are still short of them. We cannot make up for many years that we had lost before in the care system for the youngest children. Well, it results in the fact, just look and see why people aged 25, 44 are idle. This is the time when they should involve in intense work. A vast majority of them say that they are not working because they take care of children. This is many more women compared to other European countries, so you can see great deficiencies here. And the pension system, it does not improve the situation. 60 years for women, 65 for men. This decision does not improve the situation. Young women are treated by employers as those one who will retire earlier, so they should not be invested in. You should think about replacing them sooner or later. This is by no means good. Poland is one of the 2 European Union countries, only Romania has got different retirement age, though this difference is not that big because we've got 5-year difference. In Romania, they are discussing the possibility of equaling the retirement age. The fact that we have different age for men and women, people are not ready to take up the discussion because we experienced a very emotional discussion before the previous election. So it results in the fact that ladies will have smaller pensions in the future. According to Professor Jana Tyrowicz's assessment, she's the representative of Warsaw University, indicating that many of women will take the minimum pension only. So there is a whole lot of problems related to ladies' activities in the labor market. And the inequality at home is translated into inequalities in the labor market, which is only amplified by this age difference in retirement age. So you will be experiencing poor elderly age, and this has got the face of a woman, and it is going to aggravate in the future.
Yeah, so I'm hearing from both of you really that there's definitely a willingness to go more in the direction of equal treatment, because the idea of having quotas or having different retirement ages can actually risk antagonizing the situation more than it can help to solve it. So then it seems to me that the core of the solution would lie then more in what Justyna mentioned about changing attitudes and trying to enable a mindset that women feel strong and powerful and that men feel ready to kind of balance that out. Justyna, I wanted to ask you a bit about what role you think education could play in that, and if there would be something you would like to include in national education syllabuses that would somehow enable to change this cultural mindset.
Myślę, że to tutaj odwołując się jeszcze do tego, co mówiła pani profesor.
Referring to what Madam Professor was speaking about, what Andrzej was speaking about, us being responsible is very important. Not only should we speak about quotas, but about watching people work. I'm speaking about professors, editors-in-chief of most popular newspapers, and those who wield the power in Poland. I like when people walk the talk. You've got, for example, a debate on television and you've got men only on the panel. So the person who issue invitations to join the discussion panel on television should know that this is not the representation of our country, that only men have the possibility of having of airing out their opinion. Being myself a reporter, well, I try to face the music. When I write about clergy and church being the perpetrators, I pay attention to the fact that we speak about men and women equally. Not only do we present man's perspective only, but there is this clear tendency in Poland. The same pertains to perpetrators, like priests or men. The person who's been humiliated is usually a man, and the person who's humiliated the other person is a man too. And the persons who comment the situation are also men. So when I listen to those speaking on television, to media representatives who say that ladies do not want to accept invitations, that they prefer to stay at home taking care of their children, or they need to clean up after work, or they work until 6, so I cannot join the evening show on news television. I believe that this is the media's responsibility, so they should be careful enough to invite the right people, because you can decide 3 days ahead or a week ahead. You can make appointment well ahead. I often hear the argument that women are not that credible when they sit on the panel of experts, and this is the most painful. It is our role to find a woman who is a true expert, who is credible, and we have women of this kind in Poland. Speaking about this basic education period, what is most important for me is to have women, girls, to give them the possibility that they can do anything they want. The world has been created for them too. If they're interested in chess, parents should not be pushing them to play dolls. If they want to go to a shooting range, let them do it. Me and my friend, I observe him treating his sons, his daughters, how equal they are. It results from deep love and this belief that men and women are equal. If you comprehend it with your heart, it is more important when you comprehend it with your mind.
Yeah, exactly. And on the point of representation, I should also say it's very good today that we have Andrzej with us, so that we're not only talking about women's rights only among women, which of course does happen as well. Yeah, so thinking about the broader topic of the Freedom Games this year, I'd like to ask as well whether you see that COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdowns have somehow exacerbated the problems with women's equality. I don't know who wants to come in on that one. Andrzej, do you want to start and then?
Okej, to może zacznę. W takim razie.
Let me start.
Wciąż jesteśmy oczywiście kryzys trwa, prawda? To tornado cały czas.
We are in the midst of the crisis, and this is not going to finish soon. We are going to face it for the months to come. But we have had the first research and the first reports that try to grasp the picture of what is happening. It's quite gloomy because pandemic struck the weakest groups, those who earn the least, those who don't have work contracts, and women. There are many sources of this situation. IMF has got a separate chapter in its recent report. What attracted my attention was the fact that after closing schools, it was the ladies who stayed at home more often than men. They took care of children. This is gained from mobile phone operators who check the mobility. This is something what Justyna was speaking about. The responsibility that is more often attached to women than to men.
Należy zastanowić się nad politykami.
We should think about future policies that would help these groups of people that suffered the most. Crisis combat at the moment is at a macro level, and we very often forgot about the individuals. Central banks offer us money, record-breaking levels of stocks exchange indices, but people who work in services, that is women, are not supported at all.
Agnieszka, did you want to add something to that?
Tak, znaczy też widzimy, że ubóstwo znacznie szybciej
Yes,
wzrosło.
we can see that women suffer from poverty more often than men. The research results show it clearly. You need to pay attention to the fact that women have to reconcile home chores and professional work, including home office, taking care of their children and support in education. A vast majority of pupils stay at home, and this is the parents' help in education is associated with the fact that this is another woman's responsibility. So COVID-19 pandemic has indicated that there is a great burden for women when we speak about home chores, taking care of their children. We need to pay attention to one more fact. Justyna might speak more about it. COVID-19 has also triggered home violence problems, violence against women and children. This is yet another problem that has aggravated when we are locked at home. There's greater aggression, and women and children are victims in most cases. From the education point of view, it's not always related to the gender. There is this risk of education exclusion. Those who do not have access to proper infrastructure, the internet, computers, they have less access to education at the same time. It will bear consequences in the future, and the consequences will impact women more than men.
Yeah, certainly. We are drawing near to the end of the session, so I'd like to do a quick fire round with all three of you, and I would like you to tell me what is the one action that you think would need to be taken that would have the biggest impact if you had to choose one. Maybe I can start with Justyna.
Nie wiem, czy już mnie dobrze słychać, tak?
Can you hear me now?
Ja myślę, że takim działaniem jest
One action? Well,
takiego zrozumienia, że to jest odpowiedzialność
understanding that this is responsibility of all of us. Equality is not something ladies should fight for.
o co my wszyscy mężczyźni,
This is something we all, men, women, media people, professors, politicians, something we all should provide. One thing that will bring the best result. Yeah, it's a very difficult question because I'm thinking about education on the one hand. It would be nice to introduce it into school curricula, to have this kind of discussion, but we don't have this chance. We live in the world. When I compare myself with my colleagues from Finland or Sweden, they cannot possibly understand our situation here in Poland, how tragic the situation is in Poland. So I think that there is a light in the tunnel because we have started speaking about it. We make it public. We make the media all over the world to show the protests in Poland's streets. So this kind of solidarity and mutual support is very important here.
Okay, great. So very quickly, Agnieszka?
To ja powiem, że oczywiście teraz rozmawiamy bardzo hipotetycznie, a nie w tych uwarunkowaniach.
We are speaking about hypotheses. In the conditions we are facing at the moment, it's difficult to do anything. So let me speak from my perspective. Men and women retirement age should be equal because it will change the perception of the women who are 50 plus. It will show them as active. They can do a lot. It's very much in demand.
Thank you. And Andrzej?
Ja w takim razie tytułem uzupełnienia tylko myślę, że...
A word of supplement. Some of parenthood leave should be attached to men by definition, if not used. And I'm not speaking about a week or two, a longer period of time. If unused, you lose it. It would be very much to the benefit of men and the labor market and employers. At the moment, an employer who is facing the choice of man and woman who are the same age, they see this risk asymmetry. It's a bad situation. The employers are not to blame. Women up front are treated inferior. So this is what I want to add to this discussion.
Thank you very much. And since we're coming right now to the end, I want to say thank you to all three of you. I'm taking away the key points that we've mentioned about regulations treating men and women differently, not necessarily being the correct answer, but better childcare facilities, some way to change attitudes with more education being the way forward. So thank you very much to all three of you for joining us today. Thank you also to the European Liberal Forum and to Fondation Liberté for bringing us together to discuss this. And see you next time.
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję, do widzenia.
Bardzo